All right, wonderful. Um, Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. Sorry about the little glitch we had at the beginning of this. This webinar is a part of a series. Tonight we're talking about the Form 8500, the application for your FAA medical. Uh, colloquially, we're calling this webinar Before You Hit Submit. My name is Adam. I'm a volunteer with Clear Skies Ahead. I'm a current airline pilot. I was able to return to flying professionally a couple of years ago after going through the very process that we're talking about tonight. It took me multiple years to get my FAA special issuance because of addiction and mental health. This is a process that I know very well personally. And personally, I would like to change the process. And personally, I'd like to help make the process easier for other people. 10 years ago when I started this process, there was not a webinar like this. So the volunteers on this webinar, we're trying to make it easier for you and get information out there. I'm very proud to be flying again, very happy to have my medical. It's sort of a dream to get back to flying. We're glad that you chose to spend this hour with us. The webinar is hosted by Clear Skies Ahead, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving health and safety of aviation professionals and enthusiasts through research, education, and support. We advocate for improvements to the air medical system and we also believe safety depends on cultural change within aviation, one where health and well-being are treated as foundational, not something to be hidden or delayed. A quick clarification before we begin. The volunteers at CSA have been through or are currently going through the process themselves. These sessions aim to fill a gap we identified by providing a resource we wish we had while we were working to regain our medicals. By sharing our experiences, we hope to support you in your own journey towards certification. Clear Skies Ahead does not provide one-on-one consulting, medical advice, legal guidance, or individualized case reviews. This is the third session in a 12-part webinar series designed specifically for non-airline aviators navigating FAA medical certification issues related to mental health or substance use. Just a quick note on this term, non-airline aviator. We had to come up with a term to include everyone that requires a medical that is not employed by an airline or has the help of unions. This includes General Aviation pilots, Part 91, Part 135, CFI, AG pilots, drone pilots, ATC professionals, and DOT positive pilots that have lost their medical. Every airline pilot starts out as a non-airline aviator. Before we dive into today's topic, this slide outlines all 12 sessions in the series so we can see how this one fits into our syllabus. Our website, Clear Skies Ahead Nonprofit, serves as the central hub for this series, hosting recordings, supplemental reading, and practical tools that expand on each session's content. This series focuses on a part of the FAA HIMSS process that are often unclear or misunderstood and provides the background and resources aviators need to navigate them. Sessions 1 and 2 are available to view on our website. Over the next hour, today's format will include a personal story, a brief educational overview, a short presentation from a HIMSS AME, and a moderated Q&A with a panel. We're going to begin with a personal story tonight. We believe that understanding the system begins with listening to lived experience. Storytelling builds connection, reduces stigma, and reminds us that no one navigates this journey alone. It also allows those who share to find meaning in their experience and help along the way. Our first speaker tonight is Philip. He is a non-airline pilot who made the courageous decision to self-disclose personal challenges to the FAA during his medical application process. After 5 years of sobriety, he returned to aviation following a 20-year hiatus. bringing perspective, resilience, and a story that can help others move forward. He'll share what his life was like before, what led him to take action, and what it's been like navigating the FAA medical process. Philip's story isn't meant to tell anyone what to do, but to remind us behind every policy and process is a person. Philip, thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to share your story.
Thank you, Adam. I am thrilled to be here. I feel privileged to be working with you and clear skies ahead. So thanks for having me. So my journey began in 2003 when I was in college as an undergraduate sophomore. I was always curious about flying, going back to the first time I went up in a Cessna 172 with a friend of my father who was a private pilot. I first declared my major in aerospace engineering, and though calculus convinced me pretty quickly I was not meant to be an engineer, I was drawn to aviation. So instead, I worked toward a business degree and decided to try flying recreationally. I found a local Part 61 school, and within about a year, I earned my private pilot certificate and my multi-engine rating. Around that same time, though, I began indulging in alcohol and eventually other substances much more frequently. I remember mentioning it to my CFI a few times and remember him telling me I needed to be sure I was drinking responsibly relative to flying. Of course, he had no way of knowing moderation was just not part of my vocabulary. I started working toward my instrument rating for the first time in 2004, but shortly thereafter, I faced my first significant consequence, an overnight hospital stay and a disorderly intoxication charge. I made a bunch of excuses and I tried to convince myself my drinking was normal college behavior, and deep down I knew it wasn't. Over the next several years, I fought a mostly losing battle with addiction. I was always trying to achieve the moderation that I had been told was necessary. But I stopped flying, setting aside my dreams in favor of what I thought were fun times, which honestly is a decision only an addict can rationalize. The consequences continued, and I entered a 12-year cycle of recovery and relapse. During those years, my physicians treated me with SSRIs for depression, but it didn't help. Over those years, I learned about 12-step programs like AA, but it wasn't until February of 2019, after hitting a new low point, that I finally decided to work an honest program and begin a journey of long-term sobriety. This time, there were no legal consequences. I just gave up any hope that I could ever moderate my using. So fast forward to 2023. I had been working for 20 years in a successful financial services career, which I'm grateful for, but felt unfulfilled. And so I started dreaming again about flying. I was nearly 5 years sober, but I knew my history meant medical certification would be a challenge. Honestly, I did not think that I would be able to fly again. I started researching options and read about the HIMSS program. Uh, I learned that I could consult with a HIMSS AME before submitting my application. So in August of 2023, I met with a HIMSS AME. He was very encouraging and optimistic that I could obtain my medical certification, but was very realistic with me that it would be costly, time consuming, and I needed to be prepared to supply extensive documentation. And he told me the FAA would ask me to do things that I would not want to do, things that I might feel I shouldn't have to do, but that if I stuck with it, I would eventually succeed. So in September, I submitted my application and the AME deferred the decision to the FAA. 45 days later, I received the FAA's request for additional information, and it was overwhelming. I began gathering everything they requested, mostly amounting to medical and court records, but dating back more than a decade. I had a long history at that point, and the process was honestly soul-crushing. It had been a long time since I had thought about, the consequences of my actions over those years. One night, I found myself sitting in the middle of my living room floor, surrounded by the papers, just feeling totally defeated and honestly wondering if I could continue. But I kept going. And one of the requirements was a report from a psychiatrist. So I selected a HIMSS psychiatrist who had immediate availability, but he was out of state. So I got all the records together. I sent them to the FAA. I sent them to the psychiatrist. I met with him. The interview was pretty straightforward. Essentially, it was providing a narrative story to accompany my history, my documented history. 2 months later, he completed his report. My AME confirmed everything was in order, and now we just needed to wait for the FAA. 5 months later, I hadn't heard anything. I happened to be attending AirVenture in Oshkosh, and I learned the FAA had medical representatives there. So I was able to speak to someone. They were able to look up my case, and as luck would have it, the physician who was meant to review my case was actually there. I was asked to come back the next day, and I had this sense of hope that maybe I would have an opportunity to plead my case in person. It didn't quite happen that way. When I returned the next day, the doctor had reviewed my case and rendered a decision. And unfortunately, it was a denial due to my history. I was devastated. But he assured me that it was not a permanent denial, and that there were steps that I needed to take for my case to be reconsidered. Those steps included continuing to see my HIMSS AME while completing 14 random drug tests within 12 months. I wasn't particularly concerned about that because I had already been sober for 5 years. Uh, but the next requirement was to complete an intensive outpatient treatment program, and that was harder to accept. I had been sober for years, but because my recovery was found through 12-step programs, instead of formal treatment, I lacked clinically documented sobriety. And uh, it felt unreasonable, but I could hear my AME's voice from that very first appointment telling me, they're going to ask you to do things you don't want to do. Just do it, and you will fly again. I honestly considered giving up, though. It was requiring a level of humility that I was not sure that I had to go back into a treatment program after being sober for so long. But I decided to move forward, and I found a program near my home that offered evening sessions so that I could continue working full time. It was a bit burdensome, but it was manageable. My AME also introduced the idea of going to Birds of a Feather meetings, and I was familiar with AA, but I did not know about Birds of a Feather, and it's an AA-based recovery group specifically for pilots. And my first thought was, sure, I'll keep doing my 9 to 5 job, go to IOP for 10 hours a week, and drive an hour to an hour meeting every week as well. Sure, I can do that. Um, Surprisingly, though, my attitude shifted after a period of time. After about 3 weeks in treatment and after attending a few birds meetings, I felt a new sense of purpose. I mentioned that I got sober in 2019 through AA, and I attended meetings at least 5 days a week for those first 2 years. But in years 3 through 5, I didn't go very often. Often for months at a time without going at all. And it's because I had lost sight of why it was important to keep going, not to keep myself sober, but to keep helping others. And as a side note, I know everybody going through the SI process doesn't have a history of substance use. There are many other reasons for the special issuance process. And so AA meetings might not be a match for everyone, but I do know there are types of support groups for pretty much everyone, including a group called Fellow Travelers, which is appeals to anyone. So, I encourage anybody that's out there that may not feel like that's a match, just to keep looking and find some sort of support group because it is really important to have a community. Back to my treatment program, I had the opportunity to share my unique experience because I was the only one there that had multiple years of sobriety. Everybody else was just starting. Uh, and I realized that though I had a supportive partner and family, no one in my life really understood what what I was going through with this FAA process. And Birds of a Feather changed that. I had a community of pilots in recovery, some professional, some general aviation, just like me. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I completed the IOP, I provided the report to my AME, and began the monitoring program. I kept going to 12-step meetings, and I started working with a new sponsor and started sponsoring someone myself. In June 2025, my AME advised me that it was time to resubmit my medical application. So this time it was straightforward. I just completed the MedExpress again. He deferred it again to the FAA and assured me that I was in good shape. But I was feeling pretty impatient after all the waiting. And I knew that AirVenture was coming up, so I decided to take another chance and go to Oshkosh and try to speak to someone directly. And I did. A new member of the drug and alcohol team reviewed my file on the spot and told me to come back in an hour. This time, again, I felt very hopeful that I might walk out with my medical certificate in hand. But she told me that although everything looked good, because it had been more than a year since I'd seen that psychiatrist, I needed to go back for a follow-up. So I was very frustrated. The delay was essentially due to the FAA's lengthy process, but she was empathetic, provided her email address, and basically advised me that I could send her the updated report directly. It took 2 more months to get another appointment and for him to complete the report. Once I did, I sent it in. And finally, in October of 2025, 768 days after submitting my original application, I did receive my special issuance letter and medical certificate. So it took a great deal of persistence, some humility and willingness, but in the end, I did make it back to flying. I just hit 250 hours last week, and I'm planning to complete my instrument check ride next month. It's been a long journey, but a fulfilling one. And the journey toward my ultimate goal is only beginning, but I'm very optimistic about my future. And I really hope that my story is one that will provide some hope for others who are going through this process. So thank you for having me here. And Adam, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Philip. Thank you for sharing your story so openly. I'm kind of amazed at how many sort of similarities we have in our story. Um, I think I wish my AME gave me the advice that the FAA was going to ask me to do things that I didn't want to do. I am very sympathetic for getting that letter from the FAA and the things. The there's a lot of I guess T's that have to be crossed and I's that have to be dotted for the FAA. I was not to one up you, but I was 8 years sober, and I had to go to the initial IOP, and that it does take a lot of humility to do that. And something you said, most people that go through this process are successful in getting their medical. I guess not on our timeline, but on the FAA's timeline, but it seems to be successful for most people that go through and do all the requirements from the FAA. Your story highlights something that we hear often, that even when aviators take responsible, proactive steps for their health, navigating the medical process can still feel confusing and isolating without context or guidance. We're now going to shift to the educational portion of today's session. I'm going to turn things over to Stephanie Day, who will focus on how to go about submitting your MedExpress 8500-8 form. Stephanie serves as a General Aviation representative on the HIMSS Advisory Board and has spent many years navigating this process personally, like the rest of us, and advocating for better education and transparency within it. Stephanie, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Happy to be here tonight and sharing with all of you. I have been in the industry for nearly 3 decades now. I'm currently a dispatcher with a regional airline, and I am a student pilot. And I am happy to report, for those of you who have not heard, that I have been successful in obtaining my first class medical. So that has been a long time coming, and I just got that news couple weeks ago, actually about a little over a week ago now. So really passionate about this subject because it took me a long time. It felt very isolated along the way, and I saw this gap out there for non-airline aviators, those of us who basically are kind of on our own navigating this. So I dove deep into learning all I could about the subject, and I am not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I am a peer. This is our education coming together to pass on to you our knowledge. So I'm going to go through this, and but before I do, also I just really wanted to thank all of the volunteers that have helped put this together, and I just am really grateful for all the work that we have done in making this a great resource for others. So before you submit, this as we are going through this series, we are starting with the premise in mind that you don't know anything and that you haven't submitted your application yet. And so with that premise in mind, that's where this education is coming from tonight. Whether you have submitted, you're in the process, or you're going to resubmit, I think this is information that you can take to help others also who are going through the process. We just came back from the Women in Aviation conference where we had a booth there, and that we had a lot of student pilots coming up to us. We have a lot of college students that are in the process, or they know others who need to go through the process for mental health or, you know, a past substance use issue, and they don't know how to help them. And so that is what we're trying to, you know, provide here, is just some education to help educate, as well as for all those CFIs out there who have student pilots come to them that need a medical certificate, and they have to guide them through going and getting their medical before they can solo. So here's some of the objectives tonight. What is the MedExpress 8500? That is the FAA secure online portal for airmen to apply for a medical certificate. Your legal responsibilities, you are certifying that the information is true and accurate. You're not omitting anything. Reportable history includes diagnoses, treatment, mental health history, medication use, any DUI or legal events. In fact, it might not even, in my case, my DUI was not actually reported as or charged as a DUI. It was reduced to reckless driving, but it still showed when you pulled my driver's record, it still would show that I had a actionable offense based on from alcohol, basically. So those are the kinds of things that will be, you know, triggered on the 8500. And as you go through, this is familiar to some people. Again, the medical history asks, have you ever in your life been diagnosed with, had, or do you presently have any of the following conditions? So if you are going to check any of these boxes, and again, on this next slide, your driver's record will be pulled. If any of this information is going to pertain to you, you are going to want to pause and not submit your application, but have a conversation with your medical examiner or an advocacy group or somebody else prior to submitting your application. This is some of the timelines to be familiar with. You have, when you start an application, it will disappear in 30 days if you do not submit, if you don't do anything with it. Once you hit submit, you have 60 days to complete the examination with your air medical. examiner. If you choose not to complete your exam, your submission will go inactive, but that does not mean that it is gone. It still creates a permanent record with the FAA. So basically, submission does start the clock. It creates a record regardless of an AME exam or not. So what happens when you do click submit? Your application becomes active. Your AME must then follow FAA protocols. In some cases, you will be issued. In some cases, in this area that we're speaking to for mental health and substance uses, it will be deferred, and the deferral will activate FAA review. Essentially, once things are deferred, you're not in control of the timeline anymore. And that's basically what we want to, the point we want to bring across here is that prior to submission, you have time to seek out, get your medical records, do evaluations, start monitoring, testing, building your case of recovery and of health prior to submission. Again, once you submit, now the FAA controls your timeline. You also, before you submit, really want to know what is in your records. Dr. Susan Northrop really, the federal air surgeon really emphasizes knowing what is in your records before you apply, because if there is anything inaccurate, a misdiagnosis, anything that needs to be cleared up, you need to clear that up before you submit, if at all possible, because after you submit, it's going to be a whole lot harder. So again, obtain your records, review your diagnoses, identify any errors. Once you are in the system, that's when you'll create an FAA file. And so if you had a prior denial and your air medical examiner that you're going to, or a HIM psychiatrist, they will need a copy of that file. And we'll put a link to that as well in our on the website and on the YouTube video. So some common pitfalls are that people apply while they're still inactive or before they are stabilized in their treatment, and that is with mental health or substance use. If you are still, just started taking an SSRI, you may not be stable enough yet to really apply. And again, choosing a general AME for complex cases, we talked about that last session, is really fleshing out, having some consultations with different AMEs so that you are choosing the right AME for your case. Essentially, think of it as treatment first, documentation, gathering all your documentation and pulling all your records together, have a consultation. So when you go into that consultation, you know what the roadblocks are going to be. And then when you and your medical examiner are ready, then complete the MedExpress form, submit, and start your official application. Of course, again, we recommend consulting professionals, especially if you've had a prior denial or if you have complex history. Again, this is about information gathering, empowering you to have the best information and tools. So what happens after you submit? You will, if the AME can issue, he will issue on the spot, or he will defer, and then the FAA assumes the decision authority, or you will get a denial. Usually the denial will not come from the AME, the denial will come from the FAA. A denial is generally not a final denial, meaning once or if you are denied, you can still restart the process with new information. So a lot of times aviators will be denied for failure to provide information. So again, once you have all the information, you have all your documentation, you can reapply. I think we heard Philip say that he was kind of initially denied, and then he followed through with the other things the FAA wanted and then reapplied. So questions to ask yourself are, am I ready? You know, do I fully understand my medical history? Have I consulted with the AME? Have I gathered all relevant records? Am I stable and well documented? Again, we will go into disposition tables and talking about kind of how things are decided in the next session. And but really, do I meet aeromedical standards is what you want to be looking at the CFRs under what is required. And again, this is for considering for special issuance, which means the CFR states you must have 2 years of stable recovery. However, if you have documented recovery less than 2 years, that would be what is considered under a special issuance or taken into consideration, I would say. So again, it's what can you do before you submit? You can ensure that you have stable recovery, stable health to be able to really have your case to submit to the FAA. So in closing, again, this is educational only. We have one of our HIMSS AMEs on. We're going to move on so that he can share a little bit more of his experience. We also have Billy Peterson. He's a HIMSS vice chair, so that he can share a little bit as well. So I am going to leave. I did include one of the pilot minutes, and I think this just kind of sums up a lot of things as well. I'm going to play.
Pilots may wonder, what are some new tips for speeding up my medical certification? Find out in this pilot minute. It's always a good idea to pre-flight your exam by gathering the necessary documentation ahead of time. You can use the AME guide as a resource to see what's required for each diagnosis. If you need help, ask your AME, your regional flight surgeon, or any of the many pilot advocacy groups. Once collected, make sure every page is legible and contains your name, date of service, and your applicant ID and control number from your medical certificate. If this is your first exam, include your date of birth and any identification numbers referenced in letters you may have received from the FAA. Make sure all letters, including status summaries from physicians, are signed and dated. Make sure your packet includes all information required by the FAA and bring it to your AME to upload directly into your application during your exam. Until next time, see you up there.
All right, so that is the end of my sharing. Thank you all again for being here, and I am going to try and pull up Billy and Abe, and they can share a few words about the subject. You got anything, Adam?
Nope, I'll just introduce these people. Billy, he's very active in the HIMSS program. He's the vice chair of the program. He's also a professional pilot, and he's active in lots of recovery programs. You hear his name a lot out there. And then we're also glad to have AME on board tonight. Dr. Abe Timmons. Dr. Timmons practices in New Hampshire. He's been an AME since 2008 and a HIMSS AME since 2011. Mr. Dr. Timmons is also a U.S. Air Force flight surgeon and is the state air surgeon for the Massachusetts Air National Guard. So Billy and Dr. Timmons, thank you so much for being here. We'd love just a few comments, fill in some of the things that you're seeing out there in the real world, and supplement some of the things that Stephanie brought up in her presentation. That'd be great. Dr. Timmons, I'll kick to you first.
Okay, I was just going to ask who you want to go first. So great to join, and thank you for coordinating this. It's great to see. So I'll say I heard a lot of great points earlier from both you, Adam, and Philip. The HIMSS AME, I think, has a unique viewpoint. They're kind of the quarterback of the whole thing, sort of in the center. Coordinating all the different consults and reports and records, and then eventually getting everything in. It's a lot to do, and it can be a little dicey at times. So be kind to the HIMSS AME is what I'm saying. But yeah, the HIMSS AME can really play a big role in sort of, as the term is coming out now, pre-flighting your application, getting as much done before you submit. When I first started doing this, I tried to get a lot done before submitting, and I ended up doing too much, and that was, a good learning point. But I've since dialed back, and now I try to get people just enough so that when they do submit, they're at least at a good point. So there's not 3 to 4 back and forth with the FAA requesting new things and all that. So hopefully that can save some time. So that's always a great point that was made earlier. So anyway, the submitting the application, getting that letter back detailing what you need to do. I strongly encourage you have a HIMSS AME. It's tough to find ahead of time. You don't know until you meet with them, who can guide you and let you know, hey, this is going to be a lot. It's going to tax you. It's going to strain you financially, mentally. There's a lot to it. So, but I try to prep people and give them as much early info as they can. But it's their first time going through it, so it's very overwhelming. But anyway, the other thing, common pitfalls I see are people who compare themselves too much to someone else, and have those expectations that their case is going to go just like someone else's. And I think that's pretty rare. So AME or applicants should stick with the AME. It's good to get advice, and I introduce a lot of general aviation pilots to BOAF groups where they can get great advice and counseling and insight from people who are going through it currently or have been through it and have a lot of insight. But just be careful about assuming that it's going to go exactly like someone else's case. So everybody's kind of got some differences here and there that they might not be aware of. So so that's kind of some quick thoughts. If I don't know if there's any specific questions, or if Billy wants to jump in.
We'd love to have you stick around for some questions at the end do you have time to do that?
Yes.
Perfect. And so we've got some questions coming in, so there will be some for you. Hey, Captain. Welcome, Billy.
Hey, everybody.
How you
Billy
doing?
Peterson, captain over at JetBlue Airlines. Thanks for setting this up, guys. This is great. Philip, thanks for your story. I can't even imagine walking up to the FAA and getting denied to my face for being sober for 5 years. I don't even know how you would hold in the anger of something like that. But good on you for keeping on it. I mean, as you've proven, anybody can get their medical with enough time and enough proof. So yeah, it's great you're putting this on, and anybody in the Northeast, go to see Dr. Timmons. We send all our guys from New England up to him, and I've referred a bunch of GA guys, General Aviation or non-airline pilot guys over there, because he's one of the AMEs that knows what he's doing. So about the 8500 and the whole medical certification and all that stuff, as Dr. Thumbsdorf and Penny Giovanetti have stated repeatedly, the number one cause of delayed packets for pilots getting their special issuances is AME errors and a lack of information when the packets are sent in to the FAA. So everyone that's gotten a letter from the Fed saying, hey, we need more info, that's not supposed to happen, right? If you're going to an AME and you're doing everything you're supposed to do, when they send in their packet, that's all supposed to be finished. You're not supposed to get one of those letters in the mail. So that means the AME is screwed up. It may not always be an AME screw up. It may be they need clarification on an arrest, or there's something else going on, but it's missing information. But what Penny specifically has said, it's AME mistakes that are the biggest cause. So what we're doing this year at the advanced topics that we're having out in Honolulu in May is we're basically going over the HIMSS AME checklist. So when you go to your HIMSS AME and you have your 8500 filled out, there's a checklist that the HIMSS AME goes through, and it's 10 or 15 different items that need to be checked off. Do you have peer reports, chief pilot reports, or management pilot reports? Are there the drug test results, inpatient records, yada, 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 et cetera, about 15 different things. And each one of those needs to be checked yes, no, or not applicable. So what I tell people that are going to see their they're going to see their AME to get their medical, to go on Google and print that out. It's the HIMSS Initial AME Certification Guide, I believe is what it's called. Any combination of those will bring that checklist up, and bring it in and go over it with the AME. It's it's pretty simple. You sit down. I mean, you're paying a lot of money for this, and a lot of people. I mean, I know this too. When I used to see my AME, I was nervous. I would sit down, shut up, yes sir, no sir, like not ask, like kind of like really nervous. But you're paying out of pocket for this, and you're paying good money, and it's your future, and it's your hobby, and your dreams, and all this. So take the extra time, print it out, and go line by line with your AME to make sure everything that is on that checklist you have in order to be sent out. Another thing with the AMEs, I know choosing an AME is last week, but always choose an AME that uses the huddle system, because the huddle system is the way to upload everything online. And there's still some AMEs out there that, Xerox every piece of paper, every report, and then they put it in a FedEx envelope and mail it out to Oklahoma City. There are still guys doing that. The huddle system is much easier. It's much easier for correspondence between the FAA and the AME. So, shop around. If you're a new guy here, shop around if you need to find someone new, and ask some questions. And that's what these guys are for. What us at Alpha National, our numbers are all on there, and the birds of a feather. You can ask and get recommendations for things. But one other thing that I just want to bring up, being that I'm on here and I'm thinking about this, not to take up too much time, but there's a FAA HIMSS Reddit group. I don't know, it's a subgroup or something like that. And I'm always reading through, right? I don't comment on anything, because then if I do, it'll open up a can of worms. But I see on there a lot of people saying to lie on the 8500s. They're like, oh, they've gotten diagnosed with depression as a kid, just lie about it. Like, I wouldn't do that. That's a big no-no. If you get caught lying on an 8500, I don't even know what the penalties are. They may not give them to you, who knows? But I would be completely honest, especially if you're going in for something like substance abuse also. Don't lie about anything else on there, because it can come and bite you in the ass. But also, when you're applying for a medical and you have another issue, you can work them all out at the same time. So be completely honest with everything. The truth will set you free in the end. You don't have to look over your shoulder and worry about bumping into something down the road. And like Philip said, it'll all work out in the end. It may take longer than you want, but there is a process in place, and it does work. I've only seen a few people not get their medicals in a whole bunch of years, and it's for real extreme things. So, and I don't want to take up too much time. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Billy, if you can stick around for Q&A coming up next, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So now we're moving into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Before we begin, just a few reminders to help us stay within the scope and make this useful for everyone. Please keep your questions general rather than case specific. We're not able to review or advise on individual medical situations. If your question has more than one part, I'm an airline pilot, so you have to ask them separately, one at a time. Tanya will help us monitor the chat and questions, and I'll guide the discussion and step in and ask as needed to keep us on track. If we need to redirect your question, it's simply to make sure the space remains educational and appropriate for group settings. Real quick, a question is coming in, Dr. Timmons. Can a pilot talk to you confidentially before they apply to get opinions on their case? And would that be helpful? Or the second they walk in the door and they see you, is that now reportable to the FAA? Is there such a thing where a pilot can seek out an AME and that AME doesn't go directly to the FAA with that information?
So I've in the 15 years I've been doing this, I have taken people's calls and answered them and not held anything or reported anything. I suppose there might be a case where it's an extreme case like Billy's noting, where it would be a reportable type thing, but for the most part, I view that as a valuable thing to people, that and it's useful to me too, that I can answer their questions and get them steered in the right direction. And then once they do come in and establish with me as the HIMSS AME, then of course I'm acting in that capacity. But if I'm always happy to talk to somebody and just discuss their situation if needed, on a limited basis. But
Great, thank you. Billy, I think this is you. I think you run into this at the airlines probably. What do you do if you've checked no on a question in that box 18, I think we're talking about in the 8500 form in the past, and it should have been yes? So you might have misrepresented something, let's say intentionally or non-intentionally. How does somebody correct that form, and what happens?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Timmons, but you can amend the medical. So I currently am working with a guy that, went to rehab years ago and then never checked it off when he started flying. And then his guilt got to him, his rigorous honesty and all that stuff got to him. And he decided to check it and amend his medical. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, depending on what it is. But yeah, that's Dr. Timmons, I would think. I think you're allowed to amend it, and as long as you have the supporting documentation.
yes, that's correct, Billy. There's a new form now that allows you to do just that. I can't recall exactly what it's called, but it's an amendment to an 8500-7 form, and you can mark what the correction is, send it into them, and it's no harm, no foul, for the most part. So yeah, that's true.
Awesome, great, thank you. I think this question, maybe Dr. Timmons, diagnoses under the age of 18, those medical records are sealed. And I think people wonder if let's say they're 21 years old, their medical record was only 3 years ago that they were under 18. As we know, young people are oftentimes overly diagnosed with ADHD or Adderall. How does the FAA look at records for minors? And do things that happen as a minor, do all of those things need to be disclosed on the application also?
So yes, they're not protected or kept from being disclosed. The person just has to give approval, and they can be obtained and sent in. Nowadays, with the electronic medical record, it's easier in some ways and vastly more difficult because there's just such a volume of things available, and a lot of it is not medical records. A lot of it is just stuff in plain English that anybody can understand. And all the FAA wants is the actual medical record, like the office visit notes, treatment records, not after visit summaries, which is just pages and pages of stuff that anybody should be able to read and understand. And it's trying to give a person more insight so they understand what what the physician or provider was trying to tell them. But anyway, bottom line, yes, those records should be available and have to be made available, or it makes it very difficult to come up with a decision on the FAA's side if they don't have anything to review, and they're just going by hearsay. So I haven't had anybody not be able to provide anything under the age of 18. In some cases, say someone had treatment 20 years ago and it was before the age of the electronic medical record. Nothing was available. The records are gone. The clinic is gone. Nothing exists. In that case, there is a way around that, and it's usually getting the HIM psychiatrist, neuropsychologist, and an AME to all write reports, and their kind of combined evaluation will provide enough insight to be able to allow potential certification.
Okay, thank you. Can I apply again after not having been in the certification process in 5 years? So I guess Dr. Timmons, somebody applied 5 years ago, I would assume, and they took 5 years off. Do they have to start over again? Do they pick up where they left off? How does the FAA view that 5-year hiatus?
Yeah, they generally pick up where they left off, and obviously any things that have gone on in the interim. So they're going to want the update, but yeah, I've had that situation many times where someone just can't pursue it at the time, for financial reasons or family reasons or whatever, and then they come back and they just pick it up where they left off, and it's unfortunate because they get a letter that sounds like it's over, forget it, you didn't supply us anything within the time frame we requested it, so you're done. And it's not the case. I've seen people pick it up 5 years later and they just start where they left off. So it is possible.
Okay, great. I'm familiar with that letter. I think keeping on with you, Doctor, is it possible to get an SI on the initial submission if all documentation is in order? Or do you have to apply and get a denial and a request from the FAA first? So let's say this is an SI. Sometimes there's two things. Sometimes you can issue on a visit, and then sometimes you automatically have to defer, right?
Correct. So there's so kind of splitting this up into two different things. One would be like the alcohol addiction side. That there's fairly specific defined parameters. Say somebody had a DUI arrest in the past, did the breathalyzer, it was under a certain number. They might be able to get issued if that was the only offense, and you're seeing an AME who understands it, consults with the regional flight surgeon, and they decide, yes, this is okay to issue, or the regional flight surgeon will tell them to defer. So there is some instances where that's possible, but usually it's a deferral case because there's so many things that are needed initially to review to make sure everything's okay. So they usually want to do the first issuance in that case. But on the SSRI side, our side, now they have a fast track option for both ADHD track and the depression anxiety track. And if you meet a set of criteria and can provide the documentation that the AME can review, you can get issued right away. Sometimes with the ADHD part, you would need a neuropsychologist evaluation first. But with the SSRI part, it is possible to do just through the AME. Most people don't meet the criteria, but some do, and you just have to sit down with the AME and figure that out.
Fantastic. It's the first I've heard of that. That's progress from the FAA. On the box 18 on the 8500 form, item number N, you have to check yes for substance dependence or failed drug test ever, or substance abuse or use of illegal substances in the last 2 years. Now, doctor, I know you know what question is coming up. THC is legal in lots of states. If somebody uses THC in the past 2 years, do they have to check yes or no to that box?
So yes, they do. This is a tricky one because it's still not legal federally, and I can't believe I've been hearing this since I was a kid. I can't believe we can't get together on this, but anyway, it's still not legal federally. So technically, this is the Federal Aviation Administration, so it's a federal form. So that's a yes to that question.
Okay. And then follow up to the previous question. The special issuance approval on initial submission. The person is asking, I guess what I intended was if all paperwork is in order, will a deferral come back or an issuance? So I think what they're saying here is they've completed the perfect package. And do you know more, Stephanie? Sorry.
I think I know what they're talking about. And I just want to reference our first session where our person was sharing, Cameron was sharing, and he had submitted everything. He had done everything that was required and waited, and he came back. He did receive a special issuance. So as you know, Dr. Timmons, maybe you can speak to this. The practice amongst HIMSS AMEs is varying as far as some AMEs will submit early, especially for general aviation cases, because I'm not exactly sure what the FAA is going to require. And I think that's what we're, Billy, with the checklist and what we're trying to move towards is having kind of this general checklist where you can compile all that documentation and data. So there's less, back and forth between the FAA. But I think to answer this question is yes, there are definitely, like, if you have all of your documentation together and the FAA feels that it has been sufficiently provided, they will issue. They don't always come back asking for more information.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up. We're right at an hour. So thanks so much for being here. Special thanks to Dr. Timmons and Billy, Captain Peterson, and Stephanie for all your hard work putting on these sessions and your presentation, and Philip for honestly sharing your story with us tonight. At Clear Skies Ahead, we believe in improving aviation safety, and that requires not just regulatory change, but cultural change. where health and well-being are recognized as foundational to safety. You can find our webinar recordings, educational materials, and practical tools at clearskiesaheadnonprofit.org under the Medical Certification tab. This site is still evolving, so check back for new resources. We also support connection through, you heard both of these mentioned tonight a couple of times, Fellow Travelers. It's a confidential peer support community for aviation professionals navigating, it's not just for aviation professionals, it's for all aviators navigating stress or transition. And Birds of a Feather, which are AA meetings specifically for pilots and those in aviation. A brief reminder, today's discussion was educational. FAA processes change and individual situations vary. Always rely on current official guidance and appropriate professionals when making certification decisions. Our next session will focus on the FAA risk evaluation. We hope that you will join us. If you'd like to support our mission, we'll share a QR code to our donation page. If you're interested in sharing your story in the future, we'd love to connect. Thank you for being part of this community and help to move aviation culture in a healthier direction.